Campaigning for Malaysia's 15th general election is heating up, with less than 2 weeks to go before voters head to the polls on November 19th. The nation's main political coalitions, Barisan Nasional, Barisan Nasional and Pakatan Harapan, are vying for the top prize, a chance to govern the country.
While focus will be on the fight between opposition coalition Pakatan Harapan and the UMNO-led Barisan Nasional over who will be able to gain greater control, observers say the race is too close to predict, with several issues plaguing the coalitions, including infighting among UMNO.
And for more on Malaysia's looming election, we're joined by the program director at Merdeka Centre, Ibrahim Suffian. Ibrahim, let's start with the infighting reported within UMNO's ranks, with President Ahmad Zahid Hamidi dropping candidates that were seen as allies of caretaker Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob.
Yes, nomination day that passed on the 5th of November showed that UMNO President Zahid had dropped many, long-standing leaders, stalwarts of the party that were perceived to be allied to caretaker Prime Minister Ismail Sabri, as well as individuals that had criticized Zahid Hamidi's leadership of the party over the last couple of years. But the removal of these candidates, I think, created some problems on the ground, in part because they were replaced by newer members, or rather newer leaders, younger leaders, and that, I think, may precipitate internal sabotage. And given how tight the race is, this three-way race between Pakatan Harapan, Barisan Nasional, and Barisan Nasional, there are in some places safe seats that have become marginal or even too close to call by our analysis of what's going on.
Inflation, cost of living concerns are top of mind for most voters. And UMNO has a policy of providing direct cash aid and emphasizing short-term economic solutions instead of long-term policy reforms. So despite the infighting, do you think UMNO has the upper hand given the current economic situation and fears of recession?
Well, there's a couple of things that are going on within the background of this particular election. When we spoke to voters, the inflation and the overall economic climate is certainly foremost, but lingering in the minds of voters is also political uncertainty, because over the last 1 year there has been several state elections triggered by UMNO, and also the more recent developments leading up to the dissolution of parliament has also created the impression that UMNO is pushing their political agenda without much regard to the public concern about economic stability. And so there is an element of dissatisfaction among voters that this election is coming at not the right time, because with the monsoon and all. And also, over the last 4 years, Malaysia has seen unending political conflicts between the different parties that are vying for power. That's giving, a feeling that the politicians care about themselves more than the public. And then finally, there's this wild card. There's about 27% of the electorate that's comprising young people voting for the first time. And with this particular group of voters, no one's really sure how they're going to vote. One thing for certain is that the level of party loyalties among the young voters is exceedingly much lower than the general average of the electorate.
Yeah, just to look at some more numbers then, Merdeka Centre did some polling in October. It showed 24% of voters preferred Barisan Nasional, led by UMNO, while 26% actually favoured Anwar's main opposition bloc, Pakatan Harapan. That left with nearly a third, or 31%, undecided or had no preference. That leaves a lot to play for.
Yeah, certainly. I think there are a couple of things that we need to consider when looking at these polling numbers. Number one, the political culture in Malaysia still has a high degree of fear or hesitancy on the part of respondents to speak their minds in terms of which parties they choose. So we think that out of the 30% or so that say they have no preference or undecided, I think many of them have already decided or made up their minds. What we're seeing in the recent days, because our survey work has continued, is that the overt support for Barisan Nasional among voters, that has slowly declined. A lot of people are going into undecided territory, but we think that they might be considering to vote other parties. The second factor is the malapportionment or gerrymandering that occurs in electoral districts. While Anwar Ibrahim's Pakatan Harapan could capture a bigger share of the popular vote, he's still constrained in the sense that UMNO is running in smaller constituencies that has less number of voters but carry larger than equal weight in terms of the voting power. So that's, and the final point I think I wanted to say regarding voter sentiments going to this election is that unlike in the past, where UMNO can count on its conservative, nationalist, and economic track record, there is now a viable competition for the Malay vote, which is Perikatan Nasional, comprising PAS and Muhyiddin Yassin's Bersatu. So we notice that among certain segments of the voters, many of them who are dissatisfied with UMNO or its present leadership are opting to consider Perikatan Nasional. So this, I think, makes the race very hard to call.
Could you elaborate on something you touched on earlier, those 5 million first-time voters between 18 and 21? You mentioned we don't really know who they're loyal to. Do you have any sense of what impact these voters are going to have on UMNO particularly, or even if Perikatan could make inroads among younger Malay voters?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, an important block of voters because, there's nearly, 5-6 million people voting for the first time. Not all of them are going to show up, we know. But I think a significant number of them are going to play an important role in tipping the balance for one side or the other. The main indicator we have for their choice, potential choice, besides surveys, is how they voted in the Johor state election. In the Johor state election, less than half of these young voters voted for Barisan Nasional. And within that cohort of new voters, we have a significant number of Malay Muslim voters voting for the first time. And even in Johor, which is the strongest base for UMNO and Barisan Nasional, they barely scrape through 50% of the Malay Muslim vote. So the general rule of thumb that many analysts, including myself, are seeing is that in many other parts of the countries outside Johor, there is a possibility that many of the young voters might give Perikatan Nasional a chance as opposed to Barisan Nasional. Now, I think Barisan Nasional, is aware of it. And I think 70% of the candidates that they're fielding in this election are new candidates, and many of them young with impressive credentials. So we'll see whether the process of rejuvenating UMNO's lineup can win over the hearts and minds of these new voters.
Well, thank you so much for your insight and time this morning. And that's Dr. Ibrahim Suffian, Program Director at Merdeka Centre, joining us from Kuala Lumpur.